We're just seeing if anybody else was.
Yeah, nobody else is online, well, commissioners, right?
Yeah, no, not right now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm going to call to order this meeting of the Planning Commission on October 24th, 2024 at 4:30. First order of business is citizens to be heard. Is there anybody who wants to speak on any topic that's? Please come forward and then state your name for the record.
Yeah,
And about 3 minutes.
I don't think that long. Dwight Johnson. I appreciate all the work you guys put in, but and I wanted to come here personally and complain about Bob O'Brien because you guys voted against those zone changes they had. He showed up at the county commission meeting and personally supported him. That is below the belt and unethical. That's why, as a citizen, I encourage you to look for maybe a new chair, because that is not the right way to run a business. Thank you, appreciate it.
I think I will answer that just quickly for the commissioners. Point of information here. I did go to the county council and recommend that on one of the things that the commission voted for, that we have 20 acres for the resource and range thing rather than 10. And that is because it was before them and they could have passed it and passed it at only 10. And we didn't have any recommendation out of the commission on how many acres that ought to be. In fact, they suggested just not to forward that. So, but I didn't voice any comments on any of the other recommendations, but I think you should know what I did do.
What you did was unethical.
Yes, disagreement. Yes.
Saxon Sharp. And I'm here today because Bob O'Brien, and I asked him, I called him up, asked him how one would go about getting criteria added to the major utility overlay zone. And he suggested that I come to this meeting. So here I am. And
Can I just interject really quick? So the major utility was passed by ordinance by the county commission. So I guess I'm looking for what direction you gave Mrs. Sharp.
So this is going to be now, I'm going to quickly give an ex parte communication. Shannon called me up and she said, I'm Saxon. I've said that. Saxon Sharp called me up and she basically said, she thought that there were no criterion for that. And she said, how would criterion be added? I said, you should go to planning staff and you could come to the the planning commission and suggest that you wanted some criteria added because there aren't criteria there. And so I said, she could take either one of those things. She could come and speak in citizens to be heard if she wanted to. And she should come to the planning staff and say, oh, I think there should be some criteria.
I've been in a couple of times.
Okay, yeah, I just wanted to make sure you knew that it had passed. And so in order to add anything to it, we would have to take it back through the entire process. I just wanted to make sure you knew.
I understand that. Okay. So I'm feeling that time is of the essence here. I know you're all really busy, but the city is about to come before Planning Commission and the County Council to request approval of the 2.5 million gallon water tank the intersection Spanish Trail Road and Spanish Valley Drive. And this tank's preliminary plans are that it's going to be 20 feet tall and 190 feet in diameter. The city owns this property. And so I know they've already got the design in process. They have the $3.4 million in hand to build the tank. So they are moving ahead with it. The city council approved to have Hanson Luce go forward with the preliminary design for the tank. And I believe there are a number of problematic issues with this project at this location. So I'm here today to ask for a commitment from the staff and the planning commission to pursue additions to the major overlay so that there are some kind of criteria in place so that when this comes before you, you have something to make decisions on. And so I'm here hopefully in a more helpful rather than complaining capacity here. And rather than simply complain, I have made some suggestions. And I don't know if it's appropriate to hand them out. I can send these on via electronic or not. But very briefly, I know I have 3 minutes and I can do this very fast. So on page, it's 5 pages. On page 1, and this is all pretty much just copied from the land use code. It'd be more rearranging it to get something in for the major utility overlay. 9.25 on page 1, those are the existing issues for consideration. They don't really address a major utility. Proposed additions that I have added are just pretty much copied from the code. I highlighted some additions and some things. General is the same. Section, the Article 10 definitions, that needs to be reviewed to see if those are really what you want in there. The pre-application on page 2, procedures, those are just taken straight from the conditional use part of the code with a couple of changes from building to structure and permit to zoning. Page 3, the major utility, exactly the same as what's in the conditional use with the addition of maybe put something in about light pollution. Conditions of approval, that's the same. The thing that would need to be added, some kind of on page 4, violations, page 5, penalties for violations, legal action. And that's something that the attorney obviously needs to figure out. There's nothing legal action wise that really addresses what could happen with a major utility, say like, with the Cane Creek water or sewer, or this giant tank next to my house in terms of leaks, subsidence, things like that. So something needs to go in there to protect the homeowner. And that's my story.
Great. Thank you, Shannon.
Taxes. Shannon's
Shannon, I know, I
the baseball player. Shannon is my brother. Thank you.
excuse me.
He's a football. All right, thank you all.
Okay, next thing is ex parte communications. Do we have any? I should probably add, I did not talk to Shannon about anything substantive, just that she could come here and present and she could talk to staff. So that's the end of ex parte communications. Approval of the minutes. It's been moved. Second.
Second.
Okay. And Mary, you did move, right? Yeah, okay. All in favor? No opposed. And we do have now 5 commissioners here, one just slightly late and none online. Okay, presentations. Trish.
I don't think had a planning commission meeting for a while, right? Cause I feel like I need to update you on the October 1st and the 15th meeting. Is that correct?
We canceled our last meeting
That's what I
2
thought.
weeks ago, right?
Okay, correct. So let me let me back up to the October 1st county commission meeting. So a couple things that I think are relevant to you. We had Dan Stenta presented regarding NRCS Emergency Watershed Protection Program. And that specifically is revolving around the drainage that goes across Chapman and Heaven. And so he is working diligently with some homeowners there and NRCS to put together basically some grant funding to help mitigate some of those flooding issues. And then I'll go into the land use code updates, the RAR 20, and I'll try to go really quick. I watched that meeting again this morning to just give you hopefully a couple pieces of information. So the RAR 20 zone, the motion was to postpone and that passed unanimously. They were looking for further workshopping, mapping and consulting. One statement that was made was range and grazing doesn't really capture everything, so it might be useful to have two zones that are delineated for larger parcels. The second one, the removal of major utilities as a conditional use permit and require major utility overlay. First, that was denied. The first motion was to deny by McCurdy, seconded by Winfield. Many commissioners were quite concerned with CUPs. In general, in this county, there was a proposal as proposed postponement. Walker moved to approve it. So this went on and on and on. And basically his statement was it might not be perfect, but good is better. You know, we don't necessarily need perfect right now. We want to just kind of put something in place and work on the specifics of that. And Saxon is a good example of that. McCurdy then amended the original motion to postpone that, and then that failed, and then Walker made a motion to pass it, to amend the original motion, and so that we moved to, I guess, how am I saying this correctly? We did move to go ahead and do that amendment to the land use code, so that passed 5-1. 5-2 with Winfield and McCurdy in opposition. The removal of the non-ATV outfitter guide and rental. That motion was made to postpone. There was lots of discussion around getting rid of CUPs. And also this idea of revisiting our home occupation businesses. We want to really support small businesses, but we don't want to affect neighborhoods. So that was moved to postpone 4-2, Clapper and Walker in opposition, and Hadeen abstained from that vote. And then the HC density, that motion was to postpone 4-2, Winfield and McCurdy in opposition. And then moving on to the October 15th County Commission meeting, things that are relevant to you. The FLAP grant, which is the Federal Lands Access Program. In the end, there were, I believe it was 3 major projects: King Creek, Sand Flats, and then Castleton. And we ended up unanimously voting to support the Castleton Road upgrade. The subdivision improvements to Wingate Village PUD, that passed unanimously, and the plat amendment approval for Desert Soul passed unanimously. So hopefully, I think I covered. Is there anything you feel like I covered that? So I think so too. So in the end, the county commission went against one of your recommendations for the major utility overlay. The others, we moved to postpone until future land use plan, future land use map, et cetera, and so on. Yes.
Trish, what was the county's determination on the Cane Creek flood grant?
Basically, we didn't want to touch it. Okay. Touch anything to do with Cane Creek. I think that's the best kind of synopsis of that. So, yeah, and we're not sure if that Castleton, that will. I mean, we haven't gotten that grant. You know, we were close, I think, last year, but with the Sand Flats, but not sure how relevant it will be to that flat grant. Any other questions?
I think Spanish Valley was also on the list.
Yes.
Which
You're
would have been
right, you're
cool,
right.
but-
Thank you.
Yeah.
It would have been cool.
Yeah.
But I think that was the one that was like
The least likely to get
the
the
least
grant,
likely
which
to
makes
get
sense.
funding. Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. I knew I was missing one. Thanks.
Yeah. Thank you, Trish.
Okay, and I guess we're ready for workshops.
Just to be clear, I'll get this right. Okay. So CZB, the consultants on the future land use element, they will be joining us and help us with the workshop this evening. So they're at another workshop back east. So he's texting me and he'll let me know when they can hop on. So but they couldn't do it till after 5:30. So we will, we'll just keep an eye on things, but he might be able to do it sooner. So I may all of a sudden say they're on and send us that direction. So I just wanted to give you a heads up. So what we're going to talk about first is, one of our favorite topics lately is the highway commercial zone and residential use in the highway commercial zone. And this actually came about from a recent application that we have. And we realized the ordinance wasn't entirely clear on how this applicant could develop their property. And I'll explain generals right now, but so what we needed, the planning commission's help on this evening was honing in on a few things as far as how we want to allow residential development in the future in the highway commercial zone. I don't want to get into too much, should it be allowed or not allowed, since that's still a rather contentious subject. But what I want to get into is our code currently allows it and it is not clear. And so as we move forward, we want to make sure we have really clear standards for people. So one of the biggest issues that's going on is in various sections of the code, it talks about a principal use and then it talks about accessory uses. Nowhere does it talk about, I don't know what would be besides principal, besides secondary. That's not accessory to. So right now the code says in various places, it's a little odd. It says there shall be only one principal use per lot or parcel. And then it says that that principal use can have accessory uses that are incidental and subordinate to and customary to that principal use. So it gets a little confusing in that a principal use, there's use categories in the code. So there'll be a commercial retail category and what uses are allowed in that. And then there will be residential and what uses are allowed there, right? And so those are all the use categories. And so when the code says there shall be one principal use per lot or parcel, it spells out any in that use category. So for instance, if a lot is already developed with commercial retail, so it already has, let's just say it's a strip mall and it already has various uses allowed in retail. Then the owner has room on the back of his lot, like we're discussing, and he wants to put some residential development in the back side of his lot. Currently, the way we're interpreting code, that would not be allowed because that would be two principal uses on one lot or parcel. A residential use is not accessory to retail, unless they were applying for an employee housing situation, right? So what we wanted to talk with the planning commission about is how can we make it clear, objective standards, and easy for folks that would want to put residential on their commercially zoned property? How can we make that possible? So there's the way the code reads right now, the way we're currently interpreting it is that someone would have to do a land division to create a new parcel or lot to put the residential use on. The question sort of for the planning commission that we'd like some direction on is staff feels that someone should be able to develop apartments on the back of their lot and not have to create a brand new parcel or lot for that. So let's say someone owns a clothing store, and it's retail and it's in highway commercial, and they want to build apartments in the back and they want to own them. They just want to rent them and supplement their income. So they don't want to necessarily sell those apartment buildings. They'd like to keep them as their own on their own lot and just rent them. So in this scenario, they could not do that the way the code is currently written. We believe they would have to do a land division because only one principal use can be allowed per lot or parcel. So we just wanted to get your thoughts on, do you feel that that barrier is necessary? Do you feel that requiring that a residential use be on its own lot, separate from the highway commercial, the one that's actually developed as a principal use? Do you feel that they should be required to be on separate lots? And so that's kind of what we wanted to talk about as we move forward, this whole one principal use per lot or parcel. And how should we allow residential on a highway commercial zoned property? So as we move forward, as far as how are we going to do this? How are we going to allow this? How can we make this easier and more clear for landowners? We thought we'd get your thoughts on that. So that's the main purpose of this workshop. Does everybody get that? And if not, just start firing questions at me. And I included a lot of the code sections that caused this coming to you. So I don't know if you had time to look at all of them, but clearly some of it is confusing, and we would like to change some of that. That is more sort of a, how do we use this code kind of questions, but this general idea of how do we allow residential on highway commercial zone property? What would be make the most sense, be the most efficient? If we want to promote housing, we don't want to make it too difficult for someone to have to do this. And by requiring two separate applications, so you'd have to do a land division, and then you'd have to do a site plan review application to do like an apartment building or do a duplex or things like that. So, yeah, so I'll just open it up to your thoughts.
I do agree with you. I think the clean way would be to make it two parcels. That'd be the cleanest way to do it.
And that's not agreeing with me, but yes. Okay, so you think they should have to do a land division?
I'm thinking that would be the clean way, but have you looked at doing a PUD?
We discussed that as well. Again.
I can't find it in my code book.
Yeah, so the other option with the way the code is written now is someone could ask for a PUD. Again,
Rezone.
a PUD is also a rather onerous application. So, as we're looking at barriers to housing, this is kind of what we're getting at. So one option is that just do a land division and then keep that one principal use per lot or parcel.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, to me, that would be a clean way, but in fact, I think it actually happened on a section out in the valley that I worked with,
Okay.
but they never developed the residential side of it yet. But my second thought would be, because I think that's kind of how Rim Village is it went through the PUD process.
Mhm.
But that's also a rezone, so yes, it's cumbersome. It's like the PUD is essentially a rezone, so you'd have to go through that public hearing process. But it also makes that clean because you could tell which parcels can do what on each, in the sections when you do a PUD. So,
What does PUD stand for?
planned unit development.
What?
Planned unit.
Planned unit development. Sorry. No worries, no worries.
Yeah, Tony.
Wondering, this is a neophyte question, because I don't. Go on, Dave, sorry. How would a lot division work in the scenario where you have a second story residence and an overhead apartment?
So that's a little different. So the way the code reads right now, you can have a residential use on the second floor of an existing commercial use without having to do
That would be a
anything
second-
but a site plan review application
That
through
would be
us.
like a second.
Yeah, I mean, it's a special way to have residential when you have a commercial. Yeah.
Story though.
Yeah, but that's strictly for second story. And to answer your other question though, Tony, if you actually wanted to sell that separately, you would have to do a condo. Okay, so you could have separate ownership of those two structures, uses, but you would have to do a condo.
That's a bureaucratic mechanism the county assessor has to deal with. I'm thinking about like title and taxes.
Well, it's actually a state, doing a condo plat there's a lot of other regulations for that, but it ultimately is recorded and, it ultimately does create separate ownership.
First, I was just gonna ask that same thing, like, would it make it easier to do a second story thing? And then My only question is like, can we dangle any, bait for density on this as well, as long as we're like looking at this? It's like, okay, you want to do this, without, making it easier? How can, is there any possibility to be like, oh, by the way, there's also a density bonus if you're gonna do, any type of employee housing? I just like the idea. I think, people, a lot of what you're saying, all the bureaucratic steps to divide, and then you go through these processes. Like, I don't know, like, why not make it easier and streamlined? I'm in favor of that. And I'm like, oh, is there anything we can add to it to juice it up?
I was on the Aaron's theme of like more carrot, less stick.
Mhm.
You mentioned that if this residential development apartments on the backside was like employee housing, then it would be an accessory use and not a secondary use.
Well, and that's only, so right, so right now, our code, which we all acknowledge is rather complicated. Right now, there's a section in the code that allows a business owner to do an employee housing, and it's an application that they do. And it's a site plan review through our office, but it only allows up to 5 employee housing spots. And it can be an RV, a tiny house, or,
Is it only applicable to their own employees?
correct.
So what I was gonna say was, is there a way to easily like soften the language in the code so that it reads more like AEH allowable, not like their employees, but actively employed population? Like that
Yeah.
maybe could be like a find and replace function.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, certainly we could look at changing the number allowed, the number of units allowed. Or we could look at not just employed by your own business, but perhaps, so yeah, those are certainly changes we could make to the
Cause-
code at the same time.
Cause some of that stuff was pretty low. Like, it was kind of like what like Cynthia's place was. It was like, or the restaurant, the Hidden Cuisine.
Yeah,
It was kind of like, hey, you can put temporary housing, 5 units, but some of these places, I'm thinking of like the big building complex by like Standard Plumbing and the dollar store. Is that the people that are applying? Or can you say, speak to them? Yeah, I just talked
yes,
to them.
that's one example.
Okay, yeah, that's an example. And it's like, uh, there could be more than 5 units in there. So it's like,
Yeah,
do we look at a density thing per square footage of the lot? I mean, these are commercial
Yeah,
places, so we don't have to
absolutely.
have like as much open space.
no, that's a good idea, actually, Aaron. Some places will do, yeah, there can be a calculation. So based on the square footage of your lot, this is what density would be allowed. There's also ways to do it with, floor area ratio. There's all kinds of different ratios, but I think that could be one way to do it. If you look at the size of the lot and then what density is allowed, this is how things
Right,
go in a lot of places. What density is allowed, you do a calculation and you say, okay, I could have 12 dwelling units. Then do I have the room for that, right? Like depending on what type of dwelling unit I want to do. I may have to go 2 or 3 stories to get those 12. When you factor in parking, you factor in, all those other things. So I think that's a good way to do it, Aaron, as far as, how many units could you be allowed just based on the size of your lot?
So I kind of like not having to go through a process to split the lots, but I have I have questions. So what if you have an auto shop, or, the light manufacturing, which you can have in highway commercial? Then you build a residential thing. How do you get the right setbacks and stuff? Is that in the loop? It's tells us how much you have to set those back, even though it's not on a different lot. Is that right?
Absolutely. And again, that's something we would add into the code if we decide to do that. We'd do that code revision at the same time where, okay, if you're going to have it on the same lot, these are the standards that would apply, 20-foot setback, 30-foot setback, whatever we figure is, provides that buffer for folks. And does there have to be fencing and landscaping between those two uses, you know, all those kinds of things. So yeah, that would be standards we would want to put in place at the same time.
And that actually then was now a historical question, that's very helpful for me, is, so the current zoning has this sort of thing where it says you ought to have separate lots for these kind of primary, units. Why was that probably written that way? Do you have
Yeah.
any sense? Or Mary might have a sense.
Yeah, it's a good question. I did a little bit of research and I found some ordinances that originally allowed the residential and highway commercial. I found a few. I'm still digging. But there was one ordinance that permitted the second floor residential. And it was saying that it only wanted that within 200 feet of the highway. So it spelled out where it wanted that to go. And it said one of the reasons was to increase the opportunity for housing. But still allow that commercial retail as sort of the primary use on the first floor. Then there was an ordinance that allowed the density of 8 dwelling units per acre in highway commercial. And so that one I didn't have time to fully read yet, but again, some of the reasonings behind it again was to allow for more housing opportunities. So that's all I've gotten so far, Obi, but we could certainly do a little bit more research on that.
And the reason I asked that, I was wondering if that was, this kind of having buffers, et cetera, was the reason to have separate lots, but it sounds
Sure.
like you could do it without having separate ones.
You could, I mean, you could work that into the standards and the setbacks and things like that. And if somebody didn't have room, their lot wasn't deep enough to meet those standards or their setbacks, right? Then they would still have the opportunity to put residential on the second floor. So, or maybe there would be other ways to accomplish that. So those are things we can talk about in the future as we look at how do we allow this. If it has to be a separate lot, then there might be different setbacks and standards. If it's on the same lot, then, those situations could change. Maybe you want to allow both ways to do it based on what those setbacks might be, right? So, I don't know.
I would think that one of the things I see is like, do we want to make these things separate? Why don't we have them more like mini downtowns? Where it's like, there isn't a buffer. We don't want a buffer. We want housing here on top. Like, I just see that the separations of things isn't like we could have a more like little community nodes
Mhm.
of kind of more like little downtown centers. I think that's an attractive way
Yeah,
people want to live.
yeah.
And I would
absolutely.
like, my only thought is like, when you start putting buffers and stuff, then you're having like, oh, well, these are forwards facing stores here and the people, other people live in the back. And then I don't know, I think there could be a chance to do some real cool building ideas with that.
So would you agree with the staff that like separating the parcels is?
Because you can get rid of all those barrier requirements and setbacks. Like maybe the idea isn't to have those setbacks and stuff and like lean into like, oh, well, yeah, like let's have a little avenue back here and like.
Sure, yeah, and have other standards that would apply to that,
Yeah.
right? Like they all have to face each other and
Right.
create this little
I mean,
node.
there could be some cool little pockets along there.
Sure, yeah.
It's a dense area.
Yeah, and we're about, our CZB consultants are on. I see you guys. We are proposing some neighborhood, community centers that kind of are just like what you're talking about, Erin. But maybe one idea is to allow that same concept on a smaller scale. And it might have to be done as a PUD, as Mary acknowledged, so that you can see that cohesive plan and allow certain things that may not be standard setbacks and requirements in the zone, but that would have different setbacks, would allow different types of streets, would allow, different orientation of buildings, those kinds of things. So I think that's a great idea. It would be, maybe there would be a minimum lot size that would allow you to do that, because it'd be hard to do on a half an acre, let's say, right?
There's some big highway commercial lots.
Yeah, so we might want to set a minimum lot size that would allow you to apply for a PUD like that. But I think that's a great idea, Aaron.
You may want to go immediately.
Well, we'll
So,
take a
yeah,
few more. I just want to
so-
let CZB know that we saw them and
Great.
that we'll talk about this just a little bit more.
I was gonna say, I was gonna take the conversation in a complete different direction. So
Okay.
It's a great transition.
If I could just say, I would 100% agree with Aaron, except, of course, I was looking at the worst kind of scenario. You have light industrial and somebody decides, well, the minimum setback that I can use is for my multifamily housing is, and I don't know what it is. So I was worried about that kind of separation when you didn't have real property lines that might have both of those set back. So it's one thing to integrate, a small market retail and neighborhood and have houses right up to it.
I just want to make sure I understand what Bob was saying. So I think
Basically saying, let's say that you had light industrial already on highway commercial and the owner said, well, I'm going to put right next to it a multifamily apartment structure. You might want some buffering then.
oh, absolutely.
And so I agree with this kind of model for this small stuff. My kind of question was basically say, we're gonna have now some sufficient buffering probably for different kinds of developments.
Well, I think what Bob's getting at, just I'm looking at Aaron, is maybe there's some uses that should have some kind of buffer. I think that's where Bob's going, where if you really have a light industrial use and there's manufacturing going on, the residential folks may want some kind of a buffer. So I think that's just where Bob was going, rather than just doing away with buffers. But yeah, we can all talk about that. Yeah, I mean, if you go to Aaron's idea, you think about neighborhoods in Europe, okay? And
That's what I would-
they've got all kinds of stuff going on around the residential uses. So it's not something I would say the West is used to, but I think it's something it's a great idea.
Well, I
So,
look at our downtown, it's like that. We have the Cooper Building.
yeah, that's the
Go to
one.
a lot of these small little western towns, Crested Butte.
Yeah.
Hill,
Oh, yeah.
right on top. I think that you can integrate or try to encourage a lot of character in that. Just not get,
Yeah. I agree, Aaron.
anyways.
Okay. I mean,
I
that'll
just had a quick question. Is this for homeownership or rental?
it could be either one.
Either.
So clearly, if it's home ownership, it has to be on its own lot.
And it has to be different than it would be for rental, I think, because home ownership, you need light and air. I mean, people are gonna live there. You want,
Oh, renters need light and air.
all of them do, but for the most part, if you're renting a piece of property in the area that you work in, you're there to work. You're not necessarily, but yeah, I agree with you on all of it. Yes, they all do need, but home ownership, they seem to want a little bit more land than rental. I'm at an age that I want to get somewhere smaller.
Well, I
My
think
family, the family
Yeah,
wants something bigger.
I think when you talk about home ownership, maybe your brain is immediately going to single family dwelling
is.
lots or something, but
That's-
home ownership can also be a townhouse. Home ownership can
Condo.
also be a condo. So yeah, different people at different stages in their life may or may not want a big yard to take care of. So I think I hear what you're saying about if it's a single family dwelling, then perhaps it might want a yard and setbacks
And
and
you just
those
don't
kinds of
wanna-
things.
Throw everybody together.
Sure.
To rent. My sister was in a condo and I hate it because it's just everybody's on top of each other.
That's a
That's my
condo.
personal
Yeah,
use.
yeah, I get it. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. You look like you're about to say something, Tony, so
I just, I mean, I think the whole housing issue that we have in this county is that there is a lack of diversity in housing options. I mean, we don't have apartments to buy. That's the problem.
We don't.
Not a single one, so. But I've got a whole different thing about this that we're getting close to and I don't want to touch on because I want the CZB guys to go, so.
yeah. Well,
We can certainly continue it afterwards.
Yeah,
Do you
that's-
want to come back? Okay,
Would be
Yeah,
okay.
let's do that.
that's fine. Okay. Thomas and Matt and Lauren, if you guys want to turn your video on. And I will, I'll share my screen, with the future land use element, the draft. And I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, while I get that ready. Is that all right?
That is perfect. Thank you. And it looks like Matt might be trying to connect to audio, so we'll give him a second. Maybe Matt will introduce last. Oh, there he's in. Okay. All right. So it's good to see you all again. My name is Thomas Eddington with CZB, and I'm joined by Lauren. You may want to go next. Oh, Lauren, we can't hear you. That's interesting. Your mute isn't on, but we can't hear you. I will introduce Lauren home while she plays with her audio. And Matt, are you there?
I'm here, Thomas.
There, great. And then Matt Ingles with CZB. So great to see you all again.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Thomas.
Good.
So yeah, what we thought we could do is, Matt and Thomas are gonna kind of explain some of the concepts and run through this a little bit. And then we wanted the planning commission to have the opportunity to ask questions and delve into why this or why that. And also just to kind of make clear, this has gone through a process over, I think, almost 3 years. So as we look at, as we take your thoughts and your comments, I just want to sort of give a caveat, which is this document is the draft that we're presenting, and we're not going to do a complete overhaul of this at this point. It is really, all of the public workshops that have been done have been incorporated into this document. This document, and Thomas and Matt and Lauren will get into this, their direction was to make this look much different than our current general plan. As you'll see, it does. And so that was the direction they were given as far as better graphics, more user-friendly, to use that term. So it will not look anything like the current land use element, and that could throw a lot of people. And so they're going to kind of walk you through that and explain the text that is in here, as well as how it relates to the graphics. So as you go through it, it will look very different, but they're going to walk you through some of the concepts and how that all works. Okay. Okay.
Right.
And Thomas, just tell me what page you want to go to.
Perfect. I'll tell you what, maybe what I'll try to do is we'll try to do this relatively quickly, but if I go too quickly, certainly say, hey, stop, I have a question on that page. Don't hesitate to do that. But I thought we'd kind of walk you through maybe almost, dare I say, page by page, but I assure you it'll be very quickly. So yeah, as Amy noted, this was intended to replace the existing land use chapter that is a part of your general plan. Our goal was to make it look different, to feel different, to be more user friendly, to be more accessible to both applicants and developers. And so that was our intent as we put this together. And as Amy lines it up, maybe just go to the introduction. We wanted to make sure that I'm on page 4 and 5. Yeah, we wanted to make sure that as we introduced it, the land use chapter, that we respected some of the challenges that you all have. And so the first few pages of the plan do reflect that in terms of a relatively minimal population, less than 10,000 in the county. And yet it's a county that has more than 3 million visitors a year to the national parks and state parks alone. And so you carry a heavy burden in terms of being a resource-rich, recreational-rich environment. And so if you go to the next page, we outlined what a land use plan is. It is essentially, it is essentially the component of the general plan that most developers and most applicants tend to look at before they make decisions. We note on the right what a land use plan can do and what it cannot do. In particular, we note that a land use plan can guide development, it can promote sustainability, enhance quality of life, minimize land use conflicts, support economic development, lay out parameters for land use planning, create lines of differentiation where needed, etc. But what it cannot do are things such as control market forces. If you were in a soft market, it can't control that. If you're in a hard to build in market due to market challenges such as lower household incomes, which I'll get to in a second, that is certainly not something it can resolve. It can't, it can't guarantee development. It cannot predict the future with 100% accuracy. We try to forecast out about 10 to 20 years, but even that can change. I mean, over the course of the past 5 years, we've seen things that were probably unanticipated by most, whether it was the pandemic, the chase to more rural areas, et cetera, things that we can't predict. So recognize that as well. It cannot, as a land use plan, it is a non-binding document, as is all of your general plan. It can't enforce regulations, and it can't ensure 100% community consensus. It is a planning document, and so it is a bit of a policy document. This is not a zoning ordinance, and so again, it is a step before you get to a zoning ordinance or a future zoning plan. You can go to the next page. We wanted to make sure that we outlined the process to date. As Amy noted, this is a process that has essentially been going on since 2022, as you all started to rewrite sections of the overall general plan, all of the other chapters in addition to this one. The land use chapter that's in your current general plan is essentially a draft carryover from the 2012 plan with some recommended modifications. So we took that and we built upon that based upon our work with focus groups. We've met with you all at different times, the community survey, et cetera. All of that was taken into account. I should note that there was back in, I think it was 2023, a scenario A and a scenario B that was presented to the community, and there was a general preference for scenario B. You could see there on the bottom right that the recommendation was to really think about looking at keeping growth in a bit of a tighter boundary, kind of protecting the outer areas of the community and really starting to look at nodes or centers concept. I heard you guys talking a little bit about that earlier tonight. That's certainly a part of this plan, and that was also reflected in some of the earlier community input. If you go to the next page, the next section really walks through how did we get here? How did we get to this position where we have some of the both economic and demographic challenges that we have? And you say, why economic and demographic? Because those do contribute to some of the land use challenges as well. If you go to the next page, we've got some graphs there. The one on the upper left really indicates where the population is increasing. It's notable that between 2000 and 2022, the population has increased by less than 1% a year. And so the influx or birth rate has been relatively low. But where you are starting to see some significant increases is really in the over 65 population. It's up about 78%. The under 30 population over the course of those 22 years is down about 2%. So you're starting to see a little bit of an imbalance. Part of that may be what we term amenity migrants moving in, maybe folks having with second houses, et cetera. They tend to skew above 75 or 65 years old, and that may be why we're seeing that. You can also see the challenges that the national parks, the pressure that they put on your small community to address recreational and service needs for them. The increase has been pretty significant for both. Between 2000 and 2023, it's essentially a doubling of the number of visitors. You can also see some of the challenges with regard to the economy. On the very right side, you could see that the median household income increased about, 83% between 2000 and between 2000 and 2020, it increased about 83%. It's about 60,000 now. You could see for the state, it increased at a faster rate, and it's at about, what is that, 96,000. My screen is really small. But you can see that we're a little bit behind 89,000, sorry. So roughly 60 to 90,000 is the difference. It's about 30,000 per household. And so those also present challenges, especially in terms of housing affordability. If you go to the next page, we've outlined the kind of housing that has been built. We did an analysis back to 2000, and you can see that occupied housing has increased about 17%, or a little over 1% a year. All units are up about 28%, or a little over 1% a year, 1.5%. But you can see the real increase has been in what are called vacant units according to U.S. Census, which are generally considered second housing units, or they could be nightly rental units. They're really kind of resort or commercial units, and those have increased by about 89%. So a lot of the energy for housing has gone into that area. That's probably contributed slightly to some of the affordable housing challenges, because the market tends to be aiming in the direction of the second home units. You can go to the next page. Here we get into vision and growth framework. We didn't have a single vision statement for the plan, but rather some planning principles and kind of a land use ideology moving forward. Essentially, it is a commitment to peaceful coexistence with some planning principles and a growth framework outline. You can go to the next page. We've kind of outlined in a slightly different format some of the demographic and economic challenges to overcome, because I think those play a significant role in terms of the land use. We note that peaceful coexistence is going to be necessary, because it's not just peaceful coexistence. How do we create transitions and buffers between different land uses, but it's also how do we as a community work within the framework that is essentially our economy, certainly the recreational economy, certainly the outdoor economy. How do we start to balance all of that? If you go to the right, you'll see our recommendations for doing that are really to focus development on corridors, focus on reducing corridor development and focusing on center development. So kind of those neighborhood centers, those regional centers, starting to concentrate some of that density in certain areas. It's certainly not in all areas. It is not kind of how shall we say, spread peanut butter across the valley and say, increase all density. It's increasing density in the right areas where there are transportation frameworks and infrastructure. Number two, accommodate a diverse range of income levels. That is an admirable goal. I know that you guys have the high density housing overlay. That is a zoning mechanism. And again, it may need to be in the future supplemented by economic incentives, et cetera, to make it work, because zoning alone may be challenged by a market that is having troubles getting over the goal line. Collaborating with our regional partners, balance the utilization of growth management tools, meaning that recognizing when heightened density may be beneficial to you, and recognizing that that is also a mechanism to protect some of the beautiful outdoor recreational and agrarian character that is a part of the community. And then really respecting the complex character of the valley, meaning the cultural, aesthetic, and environmental characteristics. So kind of using those as planning principles, we can move to the next step, which is really outlining a growth framework that is comprised of three components. You can see on the right-hand side there, this is that more centers, focus on the centers, putting density in the right places, less corridor sprawl, defining and protecting the edges, knowing when to say, this is the line, and we'll build within that. Sometimes drawing those lines can actually help induce market demand by recognizing where we are restricting supply and where we're actually adding to supply in those centers areas. And then the third one is capitalizing upon the character that has made the Spanish Valley such a desirable location as to move to, as well as recreate in. If you go to the next one, We get into a little bit of details with regard to the centers. We outline what centers are. You guys were discussing this earlier, and you know that they're essentially mixed-use districts with higher densities. They also include residential and commercial development, primarily, kind of neighborhood commercial amenities for the most part. You'll see on that map, we've identified a couple of areas that we think could be neighborhood centers, and we've also identified a couple of regional centers. The neighborhood centers are smaller. I mean, they could be a few blocks in or less than a few blocks in area. They could be very small. They could just be comprised of a few businesses that really service the residential areas around them. We know that up near Mill Creek Drive and Murphy Lane, almost coming down Mill Creek Drive a little bit further than actually the center shows. That could be a neighborhood center. The other one is right over near just south of Arroyo Crossing, kind of on the Resource Boulevard area where there is some available land that has not developed as kind of tech or industrial, but could offer an opportunity for a neighborhood node. The two regional nodes are the Mill Creek Drive and Highway 191, and then also Spanish Trail Road and Highway 191 a little bit further to the south, kind of where the gas station is located. That offers some opportunities. If you go to the next page down, we get into a little bit of definition with regard to regional centers. Here we start to outline the scale of a regional center as well as a neighborhood center, and we provide some simple graphics that start to illustrate how that infill might take place. You could start to see there that it is both a mix of maybe horizontal mixed use as well as vertical mixed use, where you might stack some residents on top of the commercial development. The one on the right is showing a much smaller development. It could be a neighborhood center. A few commercial components can start to really create a gathering place, which is essentially what a neighborhood center would be. Also, maybe if you could get a sundry shop, a convenience store, something like that for day-to-day items, that can start to really create a pretty solid neighborhood center. If you go to the next page, we've got the next component of the framework is really defining and protecting the edges. We can certainly do this with the future land use map. You'll see on the right-hand side, we've got a map that essentially says these are areas to leave alone, essentially do no harm. Leave these areas at the densities that currently exist with the character that currently exists. Focus the energy instead on the areas that are along 191 and in those centers areas. So again, this is supplementing the recommendation for the centers. If we allow density everywhere, the supply would be too high. There would be no reason to create or for the market to recognize the creation of demand or simply the demand in the centers. So kind of limiting some of the areas on the outskirts, we help create that demand and funnel the growth inward. And then I think we've got on the next page, the third component, which is capitalizing upon the character. The character, you could see there, we did a community survey, an online community survey, and you can see that some people had some pretty interesting thoughts with regard to the character, but essentially it's certainly a bit Western, agrarian, as well as eclectic. And so kind of capitalizing on that character, not having to change it significantly, recognizing that change may take place, but not forcing that change, we think is actually important. It is eclectic, but it is also indicative of the way the Spanish Valley has grown over the years. So taking advantage of that and actually celebrating some of that, we think is important, whether that's with materials, design, placement of buildings, et cetera. That offers opportunities from a built landscape perspective, but it also protects the natural. If you go to the next page on the bottom right, it protects the natural landscape. On the left, we note that you all are working with UDOT with regard to a conceptual design they've laid out for Highway 191. We expressed some concerns about the scale of that particular recommendation. We think there are some really good things. Maybe limited access could be a real benefit in terms of creating safety. But we think that as you look at that area, there may be an opportunity to work with UDOT and they have a context sensitive program. And we think that working with them might be a real opportunity to look at potentially saving a lot of that unbuilt landscape and creating the road that needs to be there. I'm going to walk through, if you go to the next page, I know we're about 20 minutes in. We'll go to future land uses. This is what I think a lot of people think that the land use component of the general plan should focus on. So if you go to the very next page, you'll see that we've laid out a future land use map for the valley. In this associated with this map, you could see the place types. We think that looking at this as place types instead of just land uses offers an opportunity to not just look at the uses on the land, which would be a typical land use map, but to look at place types, which also incorporate character and allow different kinds of uses. We kind of give the example that, in a single unit neighborhood, or in a residential neighborhood, I should say, you might have churches, playgrounds and parks, and maybe even a post office or, a corner coffee shop or something like that. That actually creates the place. And so we think looking at it from that perspective offers greater opportunity to get the kinds of neighborhoods that you all want. So we've laid out this future land use map for the valley based on place types. And if you go to the next page, I won't go through all of these, but we've got the different place types outlined in terms of what the primary uses would be. In this case, for mixed use flex commercial, we've got secondary uses, and then we've got potential densities for each of these place types. Keep in mind, these place types would lay the groundwork for future zoning designations and future zoning ordinance map and zoning ordinance narrative changes. So these lay the framework. These are non-binding. Of course, at this point, they're part of the plan. You can go through the next few pages so the commissioners can see them. We've got compact neighborhood, moderate scale neighborhood. We're starting to think of this in terms of densities and mixing of housing typologies. The next page is rural residential, range and grazing. We're starting to get into the more open space land. Go to the next page, we've got parks and recreations, which are primarily defined spaces, active spaces, not just passive open space. And then over on the right-hand side, we've got 3 areas that we think are areas of opportunity. These may necessitate partnerships down the road for small area planning. The uranium mine site on the land west of 191 at Francis Drive, which is just a little bit south of the Moab annexation property, which is the USU campus site. And then we've got some land down near the arena on Rodeo Grounds Road. Those may offer some opportunities for maybe new centers that are smaller, but maybe they're planned use developments. But we think those are real areas of opportunity. The next page after that is how we would recommend looking at rezoning requests, keeping it consistent with this plan, recognizing that it meets the principles of the land use chapter that we outline here, that the proposed use would be included within the primary or secondary uses outlined in the place types, and recognizing that any existing overlays in your zoning ordinance would still apply. And on the right side, we've got a bit of a diagram that outlines how base zoning districts or existing zoning districts might translate to place types. And then there could probably be some specific zoning recommendations on the right of that, but that would be, I think, at time of zoning code and zoning map. And then I think the path forward beyond that, if you go to the next pages, are really talking about next steps. Go to the very next one is the zoning code update and the zoning map update, to make sure that you take this vision, these planning principles, and actually put it on a zoning map is important. Recognizing the importance of public-private partnerships, tax increment financing, tax abatements, tax incentives, economic incentives, because again, zoning won't get you over the road, go over the goal line with regard to with regard to compensating for certain market challenges, and whether that's the cost of building, expensive land, low household incomes, et cetera, will probably need some incentives. And then the very last 2 pages are an outline of some of the partners that we think provide opportunities in the future to actually implement your land use plan. Because again, it is not just about what's on the ground. It is about the economics to get something on the ground. I'm sorry, I think I took a little longer than I wanted. Matt, did I miss anything that you wanted to make sure we conveyed, or Lauren? Okay.
No, it was good, Thomas. I think
All right.
we'll leave us time for questions and discussion.
Okay, thank you. I think what we'll do is we'll just open it up to the planning commissioners to ask questions of staff or CZB, and so yeah, if raise your hands, and Chair O'Brien will just recognize you and you can ask questions.
Questions or comments?
I love the way it looks. My brain just really appreciates the thought and detail to the graphics and the graphs.
I was thinking the same thing, they accomplished what they were asked.
Yeah,
Way
Thank
to
you.
go, CZB.
yeah.
Is the idea of
Okay.
this to like adopt this as is this the document that we're like, this is the land use map? So that they have a scenario A and B, are we still going to like suggest?
No, that was just the history of how they got to this
Okay,
plan. And just to clarify your question, Erin, so yes, this document would be the new land use element of the general plan, and this where we're having the workshop tonight. The idea is that we'd have a public hearing at your next planning commission meeting, and then you would forward a recommendation to the county commission.
what are the like spots, sorry about, what are the spots, are you looking for like editorial things on us, or like, okay, this is it?
Well, no, we certainly want your comments, and you're going to be forwarding a recommendation to the county commission. So it might be, and I'll let CZB speak to this too. It might be, well, on the neighborhood centers, I want to make sure these kinds of uses might be considered. Or I'm not so sure about this mixed use or this compact neighborhood and what those uses are, or the secondary uses might be. So I think it's paying attention to those place types and what uses you feel are appropriate. And I also think it's paying attention to that overall land use map. What would be happening is this document would be adopted as part of the general plan, and then we'd have a separate map that is called the future land use map, and that would be adopted at the same time as well. So I'm not saying there's no time for any changes. My earlier comment was, you know, your comments are going to be taken, and we want to have it reflect what the planning commission feels is appropriate, but there won't be a complete redo based on your, you know, like if you say, well, I don't like all these graphics and I think it looks way too different. We're a little too far along in that sense. Is that making
Oh,
sense,
yeah.
Erin? Okay. But we want your comments, and so as you look at this in the coming weeks, you know, we want you to fire questions at us, and we can pass them on to CZB, because I know you haven't had too much time to look at this yet. So I encourage you to delve into it yourself and really pay attention to the text and pay attention to those place types and the map itself, you know, where we've shown an increase in density or where we haven't shown that. So I think those are the things we really want the planning commission to really focus on. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And Thomas, did you want to add anything to that, or Matt?
No, I would just echo what you said. So yeah, if there's anything that you see that you have a concern about, a question about, or you want to add or deduct, certainly let us know. I mean, you guys have been extraordinary to work with, but both from in a formal perspective here, but also your inputs from one-on-ones has been very, very helpful. So thank you for that. But really, yeah, do take a look at it, in particular the place types in the map, and make sure that you're comfortable with that direction, because it does essentially set the stage for future zoning.
I have a question about the land use map and two editorial things. They aren't very major, and I don't want to spend much time on you. I'll just tell you where they're at, and you can look at them and see if I'm right. So the land use map right now, though, doesn't go down to kind of the lot level, I'm guessing. It looks like it's kind of smooth, does it eventually go down to the, it'll
No.
just be
So
smooth?
a future land use map gives the general designation, the general
Yep.
idea for those areas. It's the zoning map
Yep.
that goes lot by lot.
And that's a great question, and that's actually by design, because we know that some places where it gets a little, the lines are a bit flowy, they cross over, and when it comes time to do the zoning map, that's where, you know, the devil's in the details at that level, but this was just to set the framework.
It's what I thought. So I'm gonna do the two editorial things. I don't think we need to actually do them now. I believe on page 32, where you have Parks and Recreation thing, I think it has the wrong description of primary, secondary, and density over on the left. I think that's
Page 42, is that what you're
Well,
looking at?
it's oh.
Good catch,
32.
you're right, you're right, that didn't get, that got carried
yeah.
over from one prior, good catch, thank you.
Okay, good. And then the only other thing was on dark skies, I think you say something about we should have a dark sky ordinance very much toward the end of the document. It's page, well, I've got it down here as page 35. That's page 35 of your report. And we do have a dark sky ordinance, if I was right in how I read that, just so you know.
Oh, yeah, we'll clarify the language to expand on that and, or keep that, yeah, I'm looking for that, right?
Right.
Okay,
I
Do you remember what picture was on that page? Obi?
I don't, it was right toward the end.
it's actually on page 48 of the document, so if you
Okay.
keep
You have
going
30
down.
35 of the document, I believe.
Well,
Well,
I thought
I think Thomas is saying page 48, so let's see.
I think it's at the bottom of page 48 on that second
Yes,
paragraph. It
you're just
notes,
right, it's on the screen, Obi. It's in this last paragraph in white, yeah. Thank
we'll
you.
fix that. Thank you.
And
Well, good
I
catch.
thought the document was excellent. Very, very nice
Thank you.
job.
I don't know if it would go in this document or if it would be down in the nitty gritty details of the zoning map, but more substance on public transportation. Would that be in this document or would that go in? That would be more like bike paths.
Clarify a little bit more, so you're saying, keep going on what you mean.
So I'm all for bike paths or like public paths. And I didn't, maybe it's in here or
Yeah, I think some of that detail will be in the land use code ordinance.
okay.
This does talk about like the neighborhood centers or the regional centers or the compact neighborhoods
Yeah.
being close to transportation, whether it be bike paths, roads, buses, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But as you read through it a little bit more, let us know if you feel it's lacking or somehow it needs to
Cool.
be. Okay.
Yeah. Get more
That's a
specific.
good point. We can actually beat that up in the place types a little. We did try to always reference walkability, bikeability, and transit stops, specifically transit stops at the centers, right? We can beat that up a little more. Also, so you all are aware, I think this is chapter 6 of the general plan. Chapter 7 of the general plan is actually transportation, and your general plan has pretty good recommendations for bikeability, walkability, but we'll tie that a little better together because people may look at these independently. So that's a good point.
And Laura, if you look at like neighborhood centers, it talks about neighborhoods within a 5 to 15-minute walk. And then it goes on to talk about transit stops. And so, yeah,
Yeah.
read through the text a little bit more.
Sure.
And, yeah, just let us know.
Thank you.
Other
I've got comments. So, couple things, you know, are we giving up on the Thompson part of this?
No, so, and again, this was before I got here, Aaron, but the direction to CZB was that this would focus on the Spanish Valley area south of Moab. So apparently the direction was that after this was done, then we would focus on Thompson Springs, we would focus on Cisco and the remainder of the county. So unfortunately, we're not doing the entire county at the same time. that was the direction that was given, so.
And then, I was looking through this and your resort commercial. I don't know who you talked to that thought, like, anybody in Moab thought we needed more of that. The places where you put it, there's places where we identified would be great industrial zones. Instead you have resort commercial there. It's next to the recycling center.
Can you help me out where you see that, Aaron? I'm just trying to zoom
Up
in.
Sand Flats Road, next to the recycling center and the dump.
Oh, this area right here?
Right. And I mean, during this whole process, I hounded that area. And it's like, I feel like many of us came to the point where it was like, oh, like, go around Moab and ask anybody if we need more nightly rentals. Did you ask people? And then the other thing is the nightly rental zone next to the Old Spanish Trail Arena. Like, again, I strongly disagree with that. And I'm like wondering who suggested that on there. And then the other thing is I've shared this with like the Grand County Active Trails and Transportation, saying that this was out. And I do think that there's a weird disconnect between like our visioning of neighborhoods and like there's like this thing where we can't quite connect in the county, like these walkability scale things. And it's like, man, if that was like integrated in here, I'd be like, that's a great thing. And then I also see some on this map, you know, where it's like the leave alone stuff. I'm looking at, okay, I guess that's what you guys came to, but like, I see things in here. I'm like, I don't know. I feel like this did not follow some of our directions of what we had in here. And the other thing, on here is if you said the word unparalleled beauty one more time, like I'm gonna like blow a gasket. Like, okay, yeah, we get it. Like it's nice here. That's the problem. And the other thing with this is your statistics on populations. Great, good go on this. We have I mean, you guys are dealing with numbers of what we have, but you know, there's a lot of unofficial population in here. And the thing that really stands out to me on these numbers is that like our decreasing 30-year-old population, that's a problem. And like, I see like economic warfare in those numbers. And it's like, that's disconcerting with me with all those numbers. It's like, we're having an explosion on one end and it's kind of like glossed over. It's like, oh yeah, we're having amenity transients or whatever term you used, amenity migrants. And it's like, that's a real problem. And the whole document just doesn't seem to address the fact that like we have a housing crisis because people are like land's going up in price. And I just keep saying like natural beauty. We have these natural beauty and people keep moving here. I think really like detracts from the serious issue that we have going on in this. So that's just my 2 cents. Good job though. Anyways, you know.
No, I appreciate that. And I would just like to echo that we really did try to incorporate that kind of framework for some of the challenges, because we agree with you. Some of those challenges relative to housing are a result of, you know, maybe those who are coming in with second house options, they can afford to be there, but not everybody who necessarily works there can be. We did try to set that framework up.
Oh, yeah.
This isn't part of the economic or housing element of the general plan, but we really did try to ensure that that was a part of this land use plan, because we could not agree with you more that is a significant component of the land use moving forward. We agree.
And Aaron, I furiously wrote down all of your comments. You were going a little fast, so I tried to get them all, and I want to go back to a couple of them. Just you said that this doesn't reflect. You said you guys that this doesn't reflect things that were talked about. So I just want to clarify that CZB did take all the comments from all the public workshops, those scenario A and B, and that's all incorporated into this map. So when you say you guys, I just want to clarify that that was from public workshops that this map was created. So I want to, maybe you and I will have a conversation later, because I want to make sure what you think didn't appear on this map. And so I do want to have that discussion and let's find out what those things are that you're not seeing, because I want to hear that. And we want to make sure, maybe not all of them got on here, but a lot of them should have. So maybe we can get into
Yeah, I
that.
was just really surprised.
Yeah, so,
that one
but
thing
your
was like,
comment
spent.
is rather strong, so that's why
Okay.
I'm wanting to, I want to clarify with you.
Yeah.
Let's do that with CZB, because I just want to see, I want to talk to you about what you're not seeing on here. So just keep that in mind and let's talk again.
Yeah.
And then you also brought up, something about the neighborhoods and walkability. So I want you to just, again, back to Laura's question, it sounds, what do you want to see, rather than just saying, I don't see this?
Right. What I see is like when you boost density, or you have these, you know, like neighborhoods blowing up, like sprouting up. You know, like Trail Mix has a whole like master plan of how people get around here, and it's really well thought out. It shows like, hey, you know, it's like this is how people walk around and move around, and it's I would hate to be like, it's like when I look at like going up Spanish Valley Drive, it's like, hey, we're planning for like the big, I don't know, someday it'll happen. I don't know what happened to it, but the big bike path along the corridor, you know, and it's like planning for that kind of stuff. So it's like, hey, I want to do this like neighborhood, and it's like, oh yeah, man, that's like Grand County Active Transportation identified this place that was like, oh, this is the missing connector. And then they build something and that got blocked off. And now you like have to like go around and walk around.
Yeah, so Aaron, if you look at this map really
Yeah.
quick, so I just pulled up the area that shows Spanish Valley Drive,
Mhm.
okay?
Yeah.
So if you look at it, and you may not be able to see my cursor. So this darker yellow is where those compact neighborhoods
Yeah.
are proposed, okay? And same along here. And then this pink is where this, mixed use neighborhood,
Mhm.
all along here. So this is all close to Spanish Valley Drive and all considering that bike ped path. So,
Right. So it's like, I mean, all that's like, oh, we have a sidewalk and a protected bike lane. Like what I've seen in this commission is like we are like, we start to be like, hey, you want to do a subdivision? We want an easement. Right? Like you like put an easement in for the bike path. And I think.
and
now's
we're
the
already
time.
doing that, Aaron.
Yeah, exactly. But like, what I want to see is like the overlay map, like why isn't, what I just see, there's a disconnect there. And I've seen missed opportunities in this area to be like, that have cut off public land access because we haven't like identified routes through subdivisions. And it's like, hey, you want a subdivision? Like, I want access through here.
So Aaron, let me just, I'll answer that and we'll get into this more later perhaps, but a lot of that happens at the time of a subdivision application, just so you know.
Right.
We're already asking for dedication for the bike ped path.
Yeah.
Okay. And then when the subdivision comes in, we look at the trails maps
Yeah.
and look to see if there's trails in the surrounding area and should the subdivision be providing pathways to get to those trails.
Right.
That level of detail isn't generally shown on a general plan. And that's where it
But
gets
they
kind of
have a
hard.
General plan.
Pardon me?
Why couldn't it just be overlaid on top?
Because we already have those maps, we have the trail mix maps, and they're also a part of the general plan.
Right.
So if we overlaid everything that's in the general plan on this map, you wouldn't be able to read anything.
Okay.
So if you look at the general plan, which is online, and I encourage you to look at it, there's multiple elements, sections to that, like Thomas mentioned. So there's the economic section, there's the parks and recs, there's all kinds of sections. And then they all have maps just like this.
Here's my point though. On this map, there's roads, right? You put roads on the map. Like what, you know what I'm saying? It's like, we give such priority to that it's just a given that a road's in there with a name on it.
And not, and not the bike paths.
I think
Right. Yeah.
There are existing
Right.
bike paths.
keep our mind
Yeah.
on the fact that the skeletal structure of a general plan and the
Right.
definition of those elements are prescribed by state statute, and we just don't get to go messing around with what a general plan looks like.
Right.
What is on top of what the
Okay.
chapters are, what they are.
I'm just
It
throwing
is
some
land
constraints out
use,
there.
not transportation.
Right.
That's, it's gotta be that,
Yeah.
you know, you can run for state house if you want to change.
Oh, yeah.
But Aaron, just to allay your
agree.
fears a little bit, in those other sections, there are all of those maps. And I
Yeah.
know you'd love to see them all in one place, and my brain would too. But this is just the land use map. But in the general plan, all those other maps are there. And that's where the planning department, where our jobs get extremely complicated and people wonder why it takes us so long to look at things. Part of that is making sure we're looking at the trails maps, making sure we're looking at all the other maps that might be applicable. But this is just the guiding document for our future zoning map.
Okay.
And I know it's hard to not see everything you want to see on this. And a lot of that detail will come in the zoning map. But then a lot of that detail comes when there's an actual application that rolls in, and it's up to staff to make sure we think about all those things. And if we miss it, it's up to the planning commission or the county commission to say, hey, did you guys even look at the trails map? That's where that play comes back and forth, right? If we miss something, we hope that either the planning commission or the county commission catches it. Our job is to try to not miss anything, but we're human and sometimes that happens. So you're our checks and balance, right? So you need to be paying attention to all those other maps just like we do.
And those plans are actually inside this plan.
Yes.
All the other plans that are talking about are in there as part of this plan. They just don't show the maps because all the plans have their own maps. It encompasses everything. It just doesn't show up on this particular section.
But I understand your frustration, Erin. Like, why
Well-
can't I see it all in one place? I get that.
Yeah. I just think it's funny that there's roads on here. Like, if this is a lane, hey, I'm not gonna beat this dead horse.
Okay.
You know.
All right.
What? Yeah.
But I want to talk later about some of your comments. So
Yeah.
let's make sure we follow up
Okay.
and Thomas and Matt and we can all follow up with you and, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. Yes, looks like Chair O'Brien wants to say something.
No.
No, okay. Anybody else have questions right now? Again, if you have questions, please send them to me or Mikkel. And we will get them to CZB and they can set up a phone call with you if that's easier. You know, sometimes it's easier just to talk, then send emails back and forth. They can do a Zoom call with you. So, but your public hearing is where we're going to take public comment on this document as well. And the public may be asking questions. And so, we'll be here to help answer as well. But, yeah, and if for Laura, who's brand new to the Planning Commission, there's a lot of questions about what is a general plan and why aren't I seeing these things? So please come in and talk to staff or talk to CZB and we can kind of help you understand the framework of that entire general plan and things like that.
One like technical remark for the CZB folks, specifically on the area of opportunity, and I apologize if you already have this language in there. I'm also on the board, and it should be noted for the public's FYI that it is likely not going to be a site usable for permanent occupancy or have any groundwater available to it. So just so that as people look at this land use element and see that huge area of opportunity, it would be wise to make that note explicit that that land isn't available, unfortunately, for housing or permanent occupancy. That's a long way out and the environmental studies and remediation are not done yet. So that maybe like underneath that area of opportunity, green overlay, something that would distort parts or open space. Just to be very explicit, yeah, something very explicit. That's come up a couple of times in the last 10 years. That's sadly not likely to be able to be restored to a housing quality level of landscape.
Thanks. That's our understanding as well, but we'll make sure that we clarify that in the narrative.
Just for the public,
Yeah,
just so that we
That's
know it.
helpful.
And they do have a site futures plan.
I don't believe so because, well, I think I'll double check, Mary. It might already be sort of I want to say appendix, but there's a whole history on that.
It also
And
gets revised every 5
It
years.
does. So yeah, it could certainly be referred to in this document, and perhaps it should, Thomas, as maybe we should refer to that. But I hesitate to put the plan on there because it does change from, yeah, so and this we try to change every 10 years. So, it's not too far off, but yeah, we'll talk with Thomas and Matt a little bit more about that, but, yeah, thank you for the reminder, Tony. Yeah, thank you.
Is CCB gonna be designing anything else in the general plan or parts of it?
Thomas and Matt, did you hear that?
What's that?
Laura wanted to know if you'll be working on any other sections of the general plan, and so I'm gonna when we get ready to do other sections, we'll certainly do an RFP.
We'd
A
love
request
to.
for proposals
Right.
for consultants to respond to that.
Yeah.
So you never know.
Nice
Yeah,
work,
we'd love
guys.
to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Thomas and Matt and Lauren. And we'll be talking to you later. Thank you.
Sounds
Great.
good. Thank you.
Thanks all. Good night.
So I guess we're going to continue workshop 1. And I think, Tony, you had a comment you were gonna make that was gonna get us off top? No, change this.
Hi, it's me.
And just to be clear, workshop 1 is the highway commercial, and we're discussing how best to not promote is the wrong word, but how best to allow for residential development in the highway commercial zone, for those of you that are just joining it.
So forgive me for having a bit of a remedial how does this work moment. But in the current scenario where we want to build some residential zoning or residential units behind this highway commercial lot, and we do need to subdivide that lot into their constituent residential units, for ownership, for home ownership, would those units continue to be a residential unit on a highway commercial lot, or would they be downloaded to or down zoned to the respective small lot residential? My concern is if we have a system where we do need to be subdividing these highway commercial lots, are we just breaking up larger commercial properties in Moab so that they can be subdivided and sold at commercial market rates?
So you had a
And
few questions.
commercial is like a nightly rental use by right. as
Yeah.
well.
Well, it is not anymore.
Well,
It's not anymore.
It is not a use by right anymore. Just to
But
clarify,
that's a moratorium.
no.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No,
Yeah.
so the only way to get overnight
It's
accommodations.
the overnight overlay. Okay.
Correct, okay.
Okay.
So Tony, you had, I
Sorry.
think, 2 questions in there and you're rolling and I'm taking notes, so just hang on.
So
So you were saying in the current scenario, as the code exists right now, you were saying that if someone wants to do residential units behind their commercial use and they want it to be for home ownership, not rental, that it would have to be on its own lot. That is correct. So again, the ability to sell something and own something is a little different than the ability to develop it. And that's kind of what we're dealing with, right? So yes, if someone wants to build townhouses behind their commercial development and they'd like those townhouses to be on their own lots and they can sell them, yes, they have to do a subdivision and create lots. In order to sell something, it has to have its own lot, right? Now, if somebody wanted to just have the rentals back there, not ownership, if they want to have townhouses, but they're just for rent, okay? And then let's say later they put the whole property up for sale. And a buyer says, well, I want those townhouses to be on separate lots and I want the commercial to be on a separate lot and I'm gonna sell them all piece by piece, whatever. So then, yes, they would have to do a subdivision at that point.
But if they do the subdivision, but they don't build the townhouses, do they get to just sell 3 highway commercial lots?
Oh, you're saying if they do the subdivision first?
Yeah.
And they don't have anything planned?
Right.
Okay, so, someone in highway commercial right now could do a land division and create a parcel on the back of their lot, okay? However, we have standards in our code right now, and this is another issue for residential development in highway commercial. There's standards in our code right now that says if you do a land division and you're creating a new lot or parcel, it has to have frontage, meaning the lot has to touch certain kinds of streets, okay? And if it doesn't, then the one option is a flag lot, okay? And that can only go to one parcel. So someone right now could divide their property with no use proposed for the back portion and sell it off. But it has to meet those standards for access and for various other things. So,
So
but that can happen right now.
my scenario is like, pretty please let me subdivide it. I promise I'll build housing. We alleviate some of those standards because it's gonna be housing and that.
No, you cannot approve a straight subdivision based on demanding that a use go there, okay? Per our code right now, straight subdivision is a subdivision. It just creates lots. The way that you're talking about, well, we're only gonna let you subdivide if you promise to build housing on the back. Well, then you might as well throw that zoning on the back of the lots, because that's the only way to assure that. You can't say,
But that is what we were talking about a little bit, sorry, with like, this is employee only housing. Or this is actively employed family housing, like we were just playing around with the idea of carriage. That's what we were talking about, Aaron and I.
yeah, and that's another
So, I'm
concept,
trying to
right?
decide what-
So hang on,
what bottom I get myself in.
that's another concept. There's a lot of things going on. So someone right now, we were talking about, could do employee housing, but they only get 5. And it literally says temporary, no, it doesn't say temporary, it says seasonal. And so it's very specific. So we talked about, it would be great if during these code revisions, we change some of those regulations, right? We talked about density for those units based on the size of the lot. We talked about maybe not just RVs, maybe actual site-built things and not seasonal. Okay, so those are all things that we want to look at with all of these, and it gets complicated, you're right, with the highway commercial. But so I think there's various ways to accomplish what you're saying. And it does depend on whether it's rentals or whether it's home ownership. But if it's just a straight subdivision right now, they don't have to say what the use will be. So the only way to control that, I'm telling you, the only way to control that is with the zoning. So if there's a fear that, and fear maybe is the wrong word, if the concern is that people in the highway commercial zone with the really deep lots could do that, could just do a division and sell off. Okay, well, why is it so bad that we get more highway commercial development? Number one, we're all saying we kind of need more of that. We need more commercial development area. So is that such a bad thing? Number two, if you really want to say, well, we only want the back of those lots to be for residential, then you zone it residential. And so zoning controls use. You don't always want to use overlays to control use, nor do you always want to use planned unit developments to control use, okay? You control use with zoning and what uses are allowed in the zone. So again, that's discussion for the Planning Commission and County Commission. If they want to say, nope, we only want residential, within 300 feet back of the highway, you can have commercial, and then after that, it has to be residential. And we would create a zoning map that shows that.
So I'm
I'm saying that for everybody, just so I know, I'm just,
And I'm with you in lockstep ideologically. I completely agree. And I'm asking myself now with this discussion about maybe we put a little bit more crochet in this paragraph about not requiring lot subdivisions and allowing for, how do we bend the rules, how do we tweak things, you crochet a blanket, you're gonna make loopholes. And I, like, a standard practice, always ask myself the question, how does a poor faith actor exploit this? And so that was a hypothetical scenario.
sure.
How does a poor faith actor exploit this? And I'm not saying that more highway commercial is bad. We need a heck of a lot more highway commercial because no one can start a small business in it. But if a poor faith actor is going to promise one thing, employee housing, and then not follow through, and if all of these random stipulations, conditions, and things are allowed that allow that to happen, and we're just shooting ourselves in the foot.
Sure.
Biting our noses by our face if we just make this more complicated than it needs
Sure.
to. So maybe I'm falling back toward where Mary was saying, like, maybe we just subdivide it or go.
Yeah, and I think back to the carrots, and the incentives that we were talking about earlier. I certainly, I do agree in incentives and carrots, and maybe that's the way where you would say, if you choose to do a residential development, here's some incentives that will help you increase your density, right? So, and that's all things that we've all talked about previously. So I think there are carrots and incentives to steer them towards what you want, if you don't specifically zone it and limit the uses to what you want. So, and it's a fine line, you want to give people options, and you want to provide incentives to maybe get more of what you want.
I again agree with you entirely ideologically. I'm just also remembering that 3 years ago, the battle cry from planning and zoning staff was that split zoning's gotta go. No more split zoning. And so that's
Well,
I'm trying to keep it.
so let's clarify what split zoning is, okay?
Okay, the back of the lot zoning, all that stuff. That was
No.
highway commercial, we had the yellow and the red.
I want to clarify what split zoning is, okay, for everybody listening. Okay, so, a general plan would not show split zoning, okay? Let me just do this really quick for those that, okay. A general plan, again, is a general idea for an area. It is not lot specific, okay? Then a zoning map is lot specific, okay? So now we're talking about a lot or a parcel. So when a lot or a parcel should only have one zone. So I have a 1 acre lot, and it's zoned rural residential. Sometimes what happens, and sometimes the wheres and whys are different, wherefores are different for different lots and different situations. Sometimes a lot will have more than one zone. And the goal, so it'll be rural residential on one half, and it'll be highway commercial on the other, okay? And there's reasons for why each of those things happen, that we can look at the history and what the heck happened? Why is it this way? Okay. So the goal is to bring that lot into compliance and have one zone. So when someone comes in with a split zoned lot that has more than one zone, we work with them to say, you need to have one zone, and this is the zoning designation shown on the general plan or shown on the map. Somehow your property got split zoned. And so that's where we try to get rid of that split zone. So a split zone is when one lot or parcel has more than one zone. And yes, we don't want to cause that situation. We don't want to create it on purpose. But when we see those, we try to correct them and put one zoning designation on a lot.
But I was just bringing that up because we just got told, in my prior hypothetical, maybe you zoned back a lot different.
And that would be in the parcel scenario. That would be if you decide to split.
I conflated the terms parcel and lot.
Okay. Well, again, those are, I'm not gonna get into that right now. They're both individual parcels of land, but a lot is in a recorded subdivision, and a parcel is not in a recorded subdivision to make it even more complicated. But what we would do, Tony, in that scenario, to not create split lots, split zone lots, the general plan would show a residential strip behind the highway commercial strip, right? And then each individual owner has to come in and say, I want to have a residentially zoned lot and put a subdivision in there. So then it's a zone change that is made by the boundaries of the property. Okay, so again, that's the difference between the general plan and the zoning map. The general plan will say, yeah, we want this area behind the highway commercial to be residential, but we're not going to be saying, it has to follow lot lines that don't exist. Okay. Hopefully that answers that
No,
question. Okay. Aaron's not looking so sure. Okay. All right.
It's always like peeling an onion. There's always a layer.
It is. And so the goal is always to try to make things clearer and simpler, not only for us as staff or you as the planning commission, but also for the landowner and the applicant. There's tons of layers right now. And the goal is to get rid of some of those layers so that it's clearer for everyone. And also simpler and easier for someone that is a landowner, and they, whether it be me or whether it be a developer, to understand what they can and can't do and how do they do it. That's really, how do we make those things clearer and easier to understand?
There's a lot of different players. Side plan. So just right land. Area. Responsibility by the developer that they have to bring into the planning office to say, hey, this is what I want to do, this is how I can accomplish that.
So
Based on what's.
Like-
And everybody.
I guess you're trying to take input from us, what the policy should be. And I feel like, I don't know if we wrapped it up, but I'm just kind of like, it seems like we value commercial a lot. And the only way that we'll sacrifice commercial is if it's high dense employee housing or some kind of
Yeah.
not employee housing, affordable housing. I would say, I don't know if that's kind of the general consensus, or do you have other visions behind it? I mean, concerns on all
That generally tracks.
Right.
Yeah.
that, yeah.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, I think that sums it up, Aaron. And so I think that's where staff will go back and think about how do we reflect that in the proposed land use code revision, right? Because I don't think, I think we all felt that the current revision wasn't reflecting that. And the county commission realized that and agreed and said, okay, go back and let's really look at this and evaluate this and let's try again, right? So that's why we're here is, okay, how can we accomplish that goal that Aaron just said, where we all value commercial, and the only way we're willing to give it up is if it's housing. So housing for the folks that live here and work here. So that's up to staff to craft that. So no, it's fine. And a lot of my explanation is for those listening and those who are new, and you know, it's a good refresher for everybody, future leaders, you know, it's a good refresher for everybody. And so, but yeah, it is like peeling onion, layers on an onion, Aaron. You're absolutely right. And it's difficult. And we do the best we can to convey that in written word in a code. And that becomes even more, that, you know, that's a whole other craft. And so, and we do our best to then say, okay, is this what you meant? Read this, you know? So we'll do the best we can, but I think we get the general consensus. And how we accomplish that, there's a number of ways, right? So incentives, carrots, land divisions, zoning, PUDs. I mean, but again, sometimes having multiple tools for people is helpful. There's multiple ways I can accomplish this, and sometimes having multiple tools muddies the water.
I mean, I like ideas that they have on like incubators, right? Like, oh, this could be a commercial zone that's like entrepreneurial people, something like that's getting maybe too far out, but I would also throw that out there. If there's any way that you could promote local entrepreneurship, but that's
No,
weird,
no.
but it's like,
I think
these were
that's
other
great.
things I was thinking about, like, we have local affordable, like, we have local housing. Why don't we have local commercial stuff, like, or small scale stuff? I've always thought that that may be one of our missing keys in like all this discussion, is that as well. And I know we have it with like neighborhood commercial ideas.
No, Aaron, and we've touched on this, and the county commission has touched on this, and we touched on this with the CUP that got tabled
Yeah.
for the outfitter and the multiple ways you can define outfitter. And then we also went into the home occupation section of the code, which is very limiting. And we talked about how can we help a small business owner who starts out as a home occupation and then grows a little bit and then grows a little bit. And now you finally need to go find a commercial space for your business, right?
It's
So
almost like we have a missing middle.
we do in commercial.
Housing and commercial.
You're absolutely right. And so that is the other thing that we're looking at, trying to figure out is that appropriate to do as a CUP in a residential area? Or is that we feel like it needs to loosen a little bit so that a home occupation can grow a little bit?
Right.
And there is what's the next step up called, Mikkel? I always forget. No, we have a little step right above home occupation. Home-based business. And that allows people to grow a little bit and then they're stuck and they have to go find a commercial piece of property, right? And so I like your idea, Aaron, about is there a way to help smaller businesses go to a commercial piece of property and continue to grow their business, not having to buy their own space or rent entirely their own space? And that's a great idea. So yeah, we can brainstorm on that too.
Yeah, I don't know how that looks in like a zoning thing. It's like, oh, hey, you live in this denser neighborhood and your neighbors may like have like a thing, like more increased traffic, and that's what you signed up for. So,
Yeah,
but
Yeah.
you get, a cheaper place, whatever.
yeah. Okay. Nice.
Any other comments?
I think we'll move on. This one will be fairly quick.
This is our discussion. SB 174.
Yes, let me just I have a nice PowerPoint provided to us by, we get to it, provided to us by, here we go, the Utah Association of Counties. So, oh, am I not sharing anymore? Hang on, sorry. I should still be sharing. Hang on. I timed out. All right. There we go. Thank you. Okay, so what we want to go over really quick is at your next meeting, there's going to be a public hearing on this item. So that's why I wanted to give you a heads up and give you a little workshop on this. This is a code revision for the processing of subdivisions that is mandated by the state. Oh, sorry, that is, I'm getting tired of that thing. That's mandated by the state. And we have to adopt this. We really don't have a choice. We do have a few choices in the processing, which we'll discuss. So this is gonna come to a public hearing to the planning commission at your next meeting. You have to forward a recommendation to the county commission. And it's gonna go to the county commission. It has to be adopted by December 31st. We have no choice. We do have a few choices in here that we'll go over. So I want to explain what this is about, just so that you can be prepared for your next meeting and fire away questions at me tonight or send us emails. The county attorney's office has been involved in this. Everybody's on board. So this is from Senate Bill 174 from 2023, not 2024, if you want to look it up. So what we are supposed to do with this this new ordinance is we have to designate an administrative land use authority. There's a section about concept plans, and what that means is, we'll get into that, like if you have a pre-application conference and you bring I want to do this, you know, and it's a sketch, it's an idea. And then we also talk about what kind of public comment can be received and made, and the approval process, okay? So this is a great PowerPoint they made for us. So this will only apply to land use decisions arising from residential subdivision applications. This will not apply to commercial or multifamily. This only applies to single family homes, two-family dwellings, duplexes, or townhomes. Okay, it does not apply to review of other kinds of land use applications either. This is just for subdivisions, residential, single family, two-family townhomes, not multifamily. So keep that in the back of your minds as we run through this. Okay. Right now, a final plat for a subdivision, even a 2-lot land division, Aaron owns a piece of property. He just wants to create another lot and let his family member build a house on it, whatever. That has to go all the way to the county commission for their approval. The preliminary plat does not. A preliminary plat is with administrative land use authority. So a preliminary plat is approved by the zoning administrator. Then the final plat goes to the county commission. In this scenario, in this new state mandated process for residential subdivisions, the county commission, the county legislative body, the county commission can no longer make the decision on residential subdivisions for single family, duplexes, townhomes. Okay, so there's choices in here. Okay, so the idea is to make this more of an administrative process and less of a political process. That is the point of this new ordinance. It will be a single authority for the review of applications. Okay, it's a policy decision for the county to decide who that administrative land use authority will be. So our current ordinance, which you will see at your next meeting in your packet, currently assigns the zoning administrator as that land use authority. Okay, the other option is to send it to the planning commission. And yet another option is to make a unique body of assorted people. So the county attorney's office and the model ordinance crafted by the Utah Association of Counties, and there's actually was a grant that the counties can use an attorney that will help craft the model ordinance. They've recommended that it be the zoning administrator. So I'm just gonna, but those are one of the choices that the planning commission and county commission has, is who do they want to designate, okay? Our attorney's office is recommending it be the zoning administrator. Okay, so it talks about a concept plan review. Okay, so we have a pre-application conference where somebody right now can just request a pre-application conference. There's no fee, and it takes up a lot of staff time. And so we're looking at that process. But now we're being told by the state We cannot make a pre-application conference mandatory for these types of subdivisions. And again, this is to speed the process up and help people get through quicker. So an applicant can request to have a concept plan review where they would just bring a sketch in to us. We're still working out the details on, can we require certain elements on this concept plan? And I don't have the answers. I will by the time we meet, because as staff, we would like to require that it have certain things so we can even tell what's going on. But we can't require a pre-application meeting as part of this process, okay? Then there is a preliminary application. So instead of calling it a preliminary plat, the language is preliminary subdivision or preliminary application, which is confusing all of us because we're used to saying preliminary plat. So we are not required to hold a public hearing nor receive public comment in the preliminary subdivision approval process. We must complete the preliminary review process within 15 business days of a complete application submittal. So we still get to deem an application complete. And that's an important thing for planning departments, is we have requirements for submittal. And if they don't submit all those required items, we deem them incomplete until they get it to us. Then there's standards for how long they can get it to us. So in this scenario, this is the rough one for staff. Once we deem it complete, we have to do a review within 15 business days of deeming it complete.
Is there a deadline right now that you guys have currently, or?
There is, so we have basically 30 days to deem an application complete. Okay, and then once we deem it complete, there's state statutes about how long we can take to complete and approve a subdivision. I don't have it off the top of my head, but there is a number of days that we're supposed to take to review.
How long on average does it take you guys? Probably depends on the.
It depends on staffing level and whatever else is on our plates of what we're supposed to do that's more imminent. So, so there we go with that. So then there's a final application process, okay, which is like the final plat. So we have to review the final plat within 20 business days of deeming it complete. So they get your preliminary application looks good. Then they can submit the final, right? So once they submit the final and we say it's complete, we have to review it within 20 business days, okay? But here comes the tricky part, which we're still grasping our brains around. So we're only allowed to have 4 review cycles. And that also gets complicated. So the review cycles includes the preliminary plat, the preliminary application, the preliminary subdivision, and it includes the final plat, final review, final subdivision. We only get 4, hey, you guys are missing these things. We can't understand what the heck is going on with your drainage. What, And we say, okay, applicant, you need to give us more detail on these things. We don't understand what's going on. That's a review cycle where we review it and we ask for more information. There's 1. So we only get 4 of those in both the preliminary and the final. We can mix however we want it to go. But if we spend a lot of time on the preliminary, which is our preference, because, okay, we got to get this right. And then when they turn in the final, it should be, yep, checking it with the preliminary, checking with the final, done. I mean, it should be, so we're probably going to use most of the review cycles at the preliminary stage. We may even go to 3 because it's like, let's get this right and then turn in the final and let's sign it and off you go. So that's the complicated thing is, once we give them comments, they only have so many days to respond. So I'm not going to get into all of that. they also have 20 days, la, 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 la. So all these things happen. So, but we only get 4 cracks at what they've turned in. Okay. Then if we don't do that, if we don't make it with the 4 review cycles, if we don't meet the 20 days, if we don't, something goes wrong, the applicant can then appeal. The applicant can say, you've taken too long. I want a decision. So that decision, is another interesting thing. We have to form this appeal board, which is different than any other appeal board we have right now. So, if we don't make it in these time frames, then an applicant can appeal. And so just know that there is a way to do that. They can do that. And so, but, so we have to adopt this by December 31st. So the only things that really the planning commission and the county commission need to decide is the land use authority, whether it be, the zoning administrator, planning commission, or some other whole other body that we would really not recommend. And then the other thing to decide, and this doesn't show it, but the ordinance you get will show it, is this appeal board. So basically the county engineer gets to propose a county engineer. The surveyor of the I'm gonna get this wrong. Anyway, people get to say, okay, this is my representative for this appeal, basically. And the county gets to choose somebody, the developer gets to choose somebody, and then there's a third, which maybe was the county surveyor. Anyway, so it kind of dictates what that makeup might be, or it says something else. So you'll see that in the ordinance, and we'll spell out in the staff report. These are the 2 things that y'all need to say. We recommend this to the county commission. Everything else cannot change, cannot, and we'll make that clear in the staff report. We cannot change most of this. It is being dictated to us. It is mandatory. We have to do it.
They really raked you over the coals with this one. I'm sorry.
It's harsh. So as staff, we're reeling a little bit.
Legislature style.
Yeah, so we're reeling a little bit. And to be fair, the county, this came about because our county in particular was taking an extremely long time to approve subdivisions. So this is a little hand slap, but it also, other counties, were also taking an extremely long time. So there was no, once you get into these review cycles where we say we need this, and an applicant, also in the code, you'll see an applicant can say, well, I'm not going to give it to you. And so now there's a process. And so if 20 days have passed, we've met all the deadlines and we're on the final review cycle and we're saying we still need this stuff, and 20 days goes by and they don't give it to us, at that point, we can deny the application. So we do have some ways to say, all right, well, they didn't do what they were supposed to do, so done, right? But in the meantime, we've got to follow these cycles and follow this process. And so it has to come to you to provide a recommendation to the county commission. And those are literally, there's just a few things you get to say, yeah, we think it should be this.
I know you guys are getting crushed right now, so I apologize for what I'm about to ask.
Okay.
But as soon as that draft ordinance is available, can we get a copy of that right away?
Yeah.
Sooner than the
I have it right now. I can email it to you tomorrow.
That would be great,
Okay.
because there are a lot of little subtextual things I'd like to think about. Like, there are only so many licensed surveyors in Grand County. I think there
Yep.
would only be like 2.
Yeah.
And so when we there's a lot of research that we're gonna need to do in order to make well-informed decisions when our options are this narrow.
Sure. Yeah.
That's
Understood.
So there were 2 main decisions, either choosing the what's it, the land?
The land use authority.
Land use authority is either the zoning administrator or the planning commission.
Mhm.
Who's the zoning administrator?
I
That's
am.
you. Okay.
Mhm. Or
Uh,
whoever. If I'm not in this
right.
position, there
It's the
will be
planning
another.
director.
Yes,
Is the zoning administrator.
correct.
Okay. And then deciding who makes up the appeal board.
That, and there was one other thing which I'm not remembering. And so what we'll do is we'll highlight those for you in the ordinance. And my staff report will point those out too. So when we email you the ordinance, I'll highlight those areas. And then my staff report, when you get it, will also, here's the 3 things we need you to forward a recommendation on. So, but just know everything else is the way it is. So
That's, no, I've got feelings about all of this.
yeah. We do too, Laura. We do too. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
It's ridiculous.
You can keep asking.
No, we can still deem an application incomplete. Oh, yeah.
Please get all that stuff done.
Yeah, that review is going to be critical.
That's what's-
Yeah. And yeah,
How much authority do you have to author your own application forms, checklists and criteria?
that's what we're kind of waiting to hear from the Utah Association of Counties and our attorney's office is we want to know how much can we require?
Yeah.
And so I know that there's
That's
probably some, maybe there's been some precedents, but this hasn't come into effect anywhere yet. So we'd like to see how much we can actually require. I don't think we can require much at the preliminary stage, but we would like to. And so it's very unclear. It just talks about this concept plan. And usually when you hear that term, that means somebody could draw something on a piece of paper freehand and say, this is what I want to do.
landscape architecture.
So, yeah, and so that's what we're still trying to, and hopefully we will have that answer before we bring that to you. So,
Pick up the application. Provide that information.
absolutely.
Say a lot like we need. Very range.
Yep.
Lots.
Yeah.
Road names.
Letters
All
of
those guys.
concurrence from each one of us.
Determination too. You guys have to send that to the
Correct.
departments.
Yeah. 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 So we'll still have to somehow get other departments' comments within 20 business days for each cycle. It's go, go, go. Yeah.
But that's gonna be a lot of work.
I had just 2 questions. So I hadn't understood when I looked at this online. So the administrative appeals people are already set, is that correct?
Yeah. So we
So-
basically decide in the ordinance
Yeah.
who that will be.
But it's not, they don't tell you who it has to be.
No, they have a couple options. And then we, the county, decide what we want it to be.
Yeah, this,
We
I'm
have to
talking
pick
about
one.
the appeal folks.
Yes, we have to
Okay.
pick who will be the appeal
Appeals.
board.
And what are the 2 options?
I'm sorry, I don't remember off the top of my
Okay.
head and I didn't bring it. I might be able to find it in my computer.
Okay,
These are all the questions that like we've been firing as well. Like, okay, wait a minute, and so,
Is,
because anyway,
We're the people who make the judgment, or is that your advocate of your position? That's why.
say that one more time.
So
Aaron.
like you form an appeal board, but is that the judge and jury, or is the appeal board your advocates that's gonna go before like a state arbitrator?
Well, so initially, depending on who the land use authority is. So if we go with the zoning administrator, they would make the decision. If I were to issue a denial for some reason and they're not happy with that, the applicant, they could then appeal that decision. And it would go to this appeal board first. If we don't make all the timeframes that we're supposed to, it can go to this appeal board. And they would make a decision. And then if, again, the developer, the applicant didn't like that decision, they can then appeal it to a higher level.
that would be the administrative law review judge or whatever.
Again, I'm still learning this just like you are. I don't know if that would go to circuit court or if that would then go to the county commission. I need to clarify that. So, but the appeal board, Aaron, is specifically if I issue, if the zoning administrator issues a decision the applicant doesn't agree with, they can appeal that to this zoning board, the appeal board, or if we don't meet these timeframes.
And the second question was, if it's the zoning administrator, you wouldn't, would you still be able to have a public hearing? How would that look?
So right,
That kind of
so
cancels
right-
a public hearing if it's the zoning
Well,
administrator.
right now, we don't have public hearings
Yes.
on preliminary plats or final plats. It's a public meeting. It's on an agenda. It is a public meeting. It is not a public hearing. So nothing is changing. That remains the same. No public hearing is required for a subdivision, a straight subdivision. I'm not talking PUDs.
Gotcha.
I'm not talking, okay, so a straight subdivision, there's no public hearing, and that is not changing.
But say the public meeting part of it,
Right now,
right now it is.
a preliminary plat is
Yep.
approved
Yep.
by the zoning administrator. Then the final plat, which should match the preliminary plat, and there shouldn't be anything discretionary going on, goes to the county commission and and in a public meeting,
Where
not a
citizens can
hearing.
Be heard.
Gotcha.
No.
Oh,
A public meeting is an agenda item, a business item, and the county commission makes a decision. There's no public comment. There's no. And that's the way it is right now. Yeah, and it'll remain that way. So those things aren't changing,
except it won't.
except it won't go to county commission at all. It is literally stated in here. It cannot.
So where does the final plat go? Oh, that. so you're
Whoever the
signature
land
on it.
use authority is,
You're the signature on it. You make sure all the other.
Done.
signatures are-
yeah, so.
That's why it's so important when we write our subdivision regulations from preliminary all the way through final, because that's the only regulation that the zoning administrator follow. So that's why it's.
The
so
code
important.
and the
This is so-
standards, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why they've taken it away.
Yeah, because a subdivision, a straight subdivision should be very straightforward. It meets the standards for the lot size. It meets the standards for the density for the zoning It's very straightforward. There is no discretionary things to decide about it. It either meets it or it doesn't.
And that's why, under the circumstance, I could see why they're going the route they're going, but still, there's always something that goes wrong. We need more information.
The only argument that I see not having the county staff is preliminary review. I've seen this a couple times where developers have come in and they I don't know if they fully understood the potential of what they could do. And I don't, I'm people come to you and then that's a big ask. It sounds like your workload increased. So would there be any argument for being have the county commission preliminary review?
They cannot.
Well, no, that's when you have
Planning commission.
the planning commission. That's what I'm saying. Is there any argument? Seems like you're no. I totally get why, it'd be have us,
Sure.
do it, but it may decrease your workload. And it may be a thing where it's hey, did you think about
Yeah,
throwing
And-
a couple ADUs in?
Sure, Aaron.
Wherever, and that's the only thing that I've seen
yeah,
that would be a benefit in an argument.
okay.
So I just.
And that is an option.
and I
So,
wanted to discuss that before we just start. It seems like we were ready just to be planning.
Yeah.
Administrator does that, and I'm just wondering.
Sure. So that is an option, Aaron. It's only an option for the preliminary
Exactly.
review. And it won't decrease our workload, just to be clear.
Okay,
Preparing something to bring to you, it doesn't decrease our workload. So,
The
but
reason
it's not a bad idea, Aaron. The only thing that we would need to work out is how does that happen in those limited timeframes?
yeah.
And so, and that could be worked out. It's possible. It's,
Well, would this buy you time? You're the next planning commission
Yeah.
meeting. is in 2 weeks. So now
Sure.
you have a-
And y'all meet on a regular basis, so it certainly can be done. And that's certainly an option. So I think, when we get
Michelle's
you,
shaking her head and saying it wouldn't buy you guys time.
I think it has to happen within those days.
well, yeah, what she's saying is, we're still bound by those 20 days and those review cycles. And so that's where it gets difficult.
Yeah, if there's like a holiday and we don't have a Monday.
Yeah, and so I think the ordinance will say may. Like there's a thing in there that it could be our choice to send it to the planning commission, meaning the planning and zoning department's choice to send it. I don't necessarily like that, because then it becomes arbitrary, like, well, why are you sending me to the planning commission, but you didn't send this other person?
Yeah.
So I don't want that. It either needs to be, it goes to the planning commission for an initial review, or it doesn't. So, and that's, we can work that out, Aaron. It's just, as staff, we just need to sit down and work through, okay, how does that work with the planning commission schedule and, those kinds of things.
The reason I bring that up is we had like that applicant, this was when Melissa was the administrator. And they had a piece of property they were looking to develop in like that our future land use thing was like, hey, this could be commercial. And the guy after meeting was like, he was like really was like, oh, wow, I didn't know all this stuff was going on. And that's it. Like, I was like, yeah, you might want to open your imagination up to like, you could get more value out of this. And I don't know what you guys' meetings look like. That's the only reason why I would say like,
Yeah.
wash it through the planning commission first.
Sure.
But-
And, I think that's a valid reason. As staff, we try not, again, the checks and balances, right? We try not to miss those things. And so that particular instance, I don't know what happened, but as staff, we try not to miss those things. But the checks and balance, like you're talking about, if for some reason we did miss something like that and the planning commission caught it, right? So that's what you're saying, is
Right.
that checks and balance. Yeah.
And also, if it came to the planning commission, we would all have to be very knowledgeable about.
Well,
Yep.
that's why I noticed
Specifics to
about it.
subdivision and all the
Yeah.
process.
Right, I know. I was like,
And you can be,
But you guys deal with it daily.
Right.
yeah.
Twice a month.
I'm proud.
But you can be, it shouldn't be super complicated, and that's the point of this. This is not a super complicated process. If your codes show all the standards, not show, if all the standards are in your code, and they are, it should be fairly simple. So it's just more, like Aaron was saying, like, well, maybe have you considered making sure you could have an ADU on some of these, like some of those questions. But just so you know, a subdivision, even though this is saying it's for single family duplex or townhouses, and you'll be able to tell by the plat usually, right? Townhouses, again, we can't get too much into land use with a subdivision. So a subdivision creates lots. That's all it does. It does not dictate to someone they have to do an ADU,
Right, yeah.
or dictate to someone you have to do employee. So it is just a straight land division. You can certainly suggest, you can certainly point out, hey, did you know that you can certainly do all of that. But we can't, with a subdivision, you can't get into what uses, as Tony and I talked about earlier. A subdivision, you're not supposed to approve or not approve based on what use the developer wants. With a straight subdivision, a PUD, HDHO, all those things are different. So. Yeah. No, it's fine.
It's why.
Which,
One of the counties.
for some reason, those other counties, it's
It's
already
my
it's
size.
already in place.
Oh, it's already in place.
Yeah,
Okay,
but
the
it-
bigger counties had to do it sooner.
yeah, but everybody else is December 31st. So I know a lot of people are looking at those counties that already have it in place to see
Class one,
what
two
issues are they
counties.
having.
Sorry, those are the class 1, 2 counties. And then the others are.
Correct. So some people are, we're kind of paying attention to how is it going with these other places. Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and not to say, oh yeah, and not to say that, you know, we hate to do lots of code revisions, but if a land use authority is chosen and then after 6 months, a year, it's decided, okay, this just isn't working out, right? Then we could go back and choose one of the other options, right? So just keep that in mind. It's not that we can never touch this. It's, but you still only have those few choices, right? Of what you can change or not change. So,
It's not permanent though.
well, this is permanent. What I mean is if it's decided that, the planning commission be the land use authority, well, we can't meet the deadlines in the time frame. It's not happening. It's mayhem. It's not working. We would go back and revise the ordinance and say, okay, no, we're going to take it to the zoning administrator because it's not work, you know. So just know that, you know, it's going to be a trial and error a little bit on how do we accomplish this? But so if one thing isn't working, we could always try another thing, but we would prefer to try something out for a whole year, you know, it's like, is this working or not? So anyway,
Is there any way to have a second workshop on this before we?
no,
No.
we have got to adopt this by December 31st. So that's why I wanted to do this. It'll be, yeah, so it'll be a public hearing. We may or may not get any public comment. And you can certainly ask more questions at the end of that public hearing and make a motion and then have discussion. So it's not that we can't talk about this again. But certainly send us questions. I'll get the draft ordinance out to you as soon as possible. We had a lot of questions on it. And so, we're hoping to have a lot of those answers for you, when we have the public hearing and by the time I write the staff report. So, but when you read it, a lot of questions are gonna pop into your head too. So, and I'll try to, in my email, I'll try to say, you know, we've thought of these questions, we're just waiting for the answers.
Let
So-
us know if we can help expedite getting those answers.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, all right.
All right. Are there any future considerations?
I've only got a year left.
Yes, okay, so let's go back to the agenda because we do need to talk about this.
Yes, good.
All right, so what we have right now, we wanted to talk about whose terms are ending.
Oh,
So, hang on one second. Where am I? This agenda does not, okay. Doesn't have everything I thought would be on it. Okay, so, under future considerations, there should be some things, but there aren't. So one of them is just alerting you to the fact that our next meeting in November is not on a Monday. Monday, November 11th is your next regularly scheduled meeting. It's Veterans Day. It's a holiday. Nobody will be here in the county building. So our next meeting is November 12th, Tuesday, November 12th. So that's one thing. The second thing is on November 12th, we will have 2 public hearings. We will have the public hearing on the subdivision ordinance we just talked about. We will have a public hearing on the future land use element and future land use map. We may get a lot of people for that, we may not. So 2 public hearings on that evening, okay? The other thing that should be on here and isn't is 2 of our commissioner terms are ending. Is that right? No. Now I have to pull it up. Let me pull it up because now I can't remember. But what I wanted to say is, those whose terms are ending, you literally have to, if you want to remain and continue as a planning commissioner, you have to reapply. And it's the original application that you did when you first applied. It's not like yeah, I want to keep going and you turn it in. It's the whole application again, okay? So what we show is that, Aaron, your term is up. and Steve Evers, who's not here tonight, but his term is also ending December 31st, 2024. So we'd love to have you back, Aaron, if you feel like you can take it. Yeah, you don't have to decide right now. Yes, we'd love to have you back. If you decide you'd like to come back, I can hook you up with Alicia in the county administrator's office, and she can make sure you have the application form that you need. And she does have a deadline for that. So just email me or Mikkel, and we will set you up with whatever you need.
And then you must advertise it, I guess, that there's
Yes.
two open,
So there
their
will,
deadline's probably the same as,
correct.
yes.
So I just need to know from Aaron and Steve if you guys want to continue, and if you do, you have to fill out that application. So, but we hope you'll both stay for another time. Planning Commission it's a lot. It's a lot to wrap your brain around, and one term is like full throttle and it's all thrown at you. I can tell you your second term feels a little better. So just keep that in mind. You've got all that knowledge behind you, and it's nice when people do more than one term and we're not breaking new planning commissioners in every, you know what I mean? So we'd love it if you would stay.
4 years.
What is?
4 years. The longest term.
No,
No.
it's two.
But it's on like a,
Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
we're not all without.
Yeah.
everybody.
So sorry, 2 years, that's what I meant. Some places it's 4, I apologize. But you know, it's really difficult when we're getting new planning commissioners every 2 years, because it takes 2 years to even know what's going on, you know, so. Yeah, so Aaron, we'd love for you to stay. We'd love for you to stay for a second term, if you can handle it. And I think that was all that was on future considerations that didn't show up. So November 12th, not the 11th, 2 public hearings. And then if you want to come on again, Aaron, we'd love it if you did, let us know. And we will hook you up with the right people to apply.
Is there a move to adjourn?
Wait a minute, 7 on the dot.
7.
Yeah,
Mine says 7:02, so yeah.
I'd still take a motion.
Yes, yes. We must-
Move to adjourn the meeting and go.
All in favor?
Hi.
All right, thank you, everybody. And thank you for hanging in there, you guys. I know that